They fired him in the middle of the lobby with the morning news still playing on the wall screens and a line of employees pretending not to stare. The security supervisor's voice echoed too loud for 8:15 in the morning. Flat, rehearsed, final, badge, keys. You can clear out your locker by noon. Marcus Hill didn't argue. He stood there, shoulders squared, hands relaxed at his sides, like a man who had already decided that dignity was the only thing no one could take from him. Around him, polished shoes slowed. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. People listened without looking the way Americans learn to witness injustice without touching it. Behind the glass turnstiles, his daughter Emily's school photo slipped halfway out of his wallet. He pushed it back in with his thumb. Slow, careful, like the movement itself mattered. The irony was sharp enough to taste. Marcus had spent the last 3 years making sure nothing ever broke in that building. Elevators that never stalled. Emergency generators that always kicked in. HVAC systems that hummed steady through Chicago winters that chewed up weaker machines. He knew the building the way some men knew old cars or worn guitars. By sound, by vibration, by instinct. And now they were escorting him out as a liability. The security supervisor cleared his throat. "We'll need you to move." Marcus nodded once and stepped toward the doors. As he passed the reception desk, the young woman there avoided his eyes. Her fingers tightened around a pen. Guilt flickered across her face and vanished. She had rent due. Everyone did. Up on the 40th floor, Evelyn Parker stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window phone, pressed to her ear, watching the city breathe. She had been awake since 4, not from panic, from habit. 40 years of mornings that began before the sun taught her that control belonged to those who arrived first. "Proceed," she said into the phone. One word. No emotion. She ended the call before the other person could respond. Below her, the lobby looked small, clean, ordered. From that height, people were shapes, movement, replaceable pieces. She told herself she didn't know the man being walked out. Told herself this was procedure, not punishment, risk mitigation, corporate hygiene. But something pricked at the edge of her awareness. Not guilt. Not yet. Curiosity. Marcus stepped into the cold with nothing but a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. The February wind cut straight through his jacket. He paused on the steps, letting the cold bite his face awake, then pulled out his phone. One missed call. The school. He closed his eyes for half a second. Emily's voice answered on the second ring when he called back, breathless, excited already mid-story about a science quiz and a broken pencil sharpener. "Hey, kid," he said. His voice didn't shake. "How's your morning going?" There was a pause. Children always knew. Not the facts. "The temperature." "You sound weird," she said. "I got sent home early," Marcus replied. He chose the words carefully. "We'll talk later. Everything's okay." He looked back once at the glass tower. The company logo gleamed against the gray sky, expensive and untouchable. He turned away before bitterness could root itself in his chest. 3 floors above the lobby, in a quiet corner of the building, no executives ever visited. The facility's control room sat humming. Screens glowed green. System stable. Marcus's systems. A younger technician stared at the monitors, jaw tight. "They really fired him." The technician muttered to no one. An older maintenance worker leaned back in his chair. "That's how it works. You fix everything until the day they need someone to blame." At noon, when Marcus returned with a temporary pass to clear his locker, a woman stood waiting near the service elevator. Late 50s, neat coat, hands clasped like she was bracing against bad news. She watched him approach with an intensity that felt almost intrusive. "Marcus Hill?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Claire Donnelly," she said. Her voice wavered despite her effort to steady it. "I was told you might be here today." He frowned slightly. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" She shook her head. No, but you knew my husband. Or at least you spoke to him once. Something shifted in Marcus's posture. Alert. Focused. Robert Donnelly, he asked. Her breath hitched. Yes. He nodded slowly. We talked in the freight elevator last summer. He was having a rough night. Claire swallowed hard. He was having the worst night of his life. She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a folded card. Plain. Cream-colored. No logo. He wanted me to give this to you weeks ago. But then he heard about what happened. Marcus took the card without opening it. He said you didn't save him, Claire continued. You didn't do anything heroic. You just stayed. You didn't rush him. You didn't look away. Her eyes glistened. That mattered. Marcus stared at the card. The hallway felt suddenly too quiet. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't realize I know, Claire cut in gently. That's why he trusted you. She stepped back, giving him space, and added, He also said you wouldn't like a fuss, or flowers. Marcus's jaw tightened. A flicker of understanding crossed his face and vanished just as quickly. I appreciate you telling me, he said. Truly. She nodded satisfied and walked away without another word. Marcus opened his locker. Inside sat his jacket, his gloves, and a small metal toolbox with his initials scratched into the handle. He ran his fingers over it once before closing the door. On the 40th floor, Evelyn Parker received an email marked confidential. Not from legal, not from compliance, from building security. Subject line lobby incident, follow up. She skimmed it, then reread it, slower. Her jaw tightened. The name Marcus Hill appeared 3 times. Each mention carried weight now. A complaint she had signed off on, a termination she had approved without hesitation, and a note at the bottom, unscheduled visitor, female, emotional, no disruption. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time that morning, the building didn't feel stable. She turned back to the window. The city hadn't changed. Traffic crawled. Trains rattled. Somewhere a man she had never noticed was carrying a canvas bag through the cold, trying to figure out how to explain to his daughter why adults with power made decisions that never landed on their own lives. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She didn't know it yet, but the structure she trusted was already cracking. And the man she let disappear through the front doors was about to become impossible to ignore. The email arrived at 7:12 the next morning, buried between earnings projections and a legal briefing Evelyn Parker had already read twice. Subject line facilities, risk exposure review. She almost skipped it. Almost. Something about the phrasing snagged her attention, clinical but oddly urgent, like a doctor circling a symptom no one wanted to name. She opened it, standing one hand braced against her desk. The message was concise, too concise. It outlined a pattern of deferred maintenance approvals overridden at the executive level during the past 18 months. Cost-saving measures, efficiency initiatives, decisions Evelyn herself had signed off on without debate. The final paragraph listed a risk assessment, not hypothetical, imminent. Evelyn felt a tightening behind her ribs. She scrolled back up and read it again slower. The report referenced internal logs, handwritten annotations, scanned into the system notes that didn't belong to any executive she recognized. Initials appeared in the margin. M.H. She closed the email and stared at the glass wall across her office. Her reflection stared back, controlled, unmoved. She had built her career on never reacting to incomplete information. Still, something cold slid down her spine. On the south side, Marcus Hill sat at the small kitchen table, elbows planted, staring at a spread of unpaid bills he had already memorized. The radiator clicked behind him, uneven and tired. Emily was at the counter pouring cereal, humming to herself, unaware that the math of their life had shifted overnight. "You picking me up today?" she asked. "Always," Marcus said. He watched her tuck her chair in with careful precision the way her mother used to. He folded the bills, slipped them back into the envelope, and reached for his phone. A voicemail blinked on the screen. Unknown number. He didn't listen to it yet. At 9:30, Evelyn convened an emergency meeting. Not with the board, not with legal, with operations security and facilities management. Faces appeared on the screen, startled, guarded. She didn't preamble. "Explain to me," Evelyn said, voice calm, "why I am reading a facilities risk assessment authored by a man we terminated yesterday." Silence pooled. A few eyes flicked sideways. Someone cleared their throat. The head of operations spoke first. Those notes were part of an internal audit draft. They weren't finalized. "Were they accurate?" Evelyn asked. No one answered immediately. Across the city, Marcus sat in the driver's seat outside Emily's school voicemail, finally playing through the speaker. A man's voice, careful, professional. Introduced himself as Deputy Fire Marshal Alan Reyes, requested a callback regarding building compliance records. Marcus closed his eyes. Back in the boardroom, Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "Answer the question." The facilities director shifted in his chair, sweat beaded at his hairline. "Marcus Hill flagged those issues months ago. We deprioritized them." "Why budget constraints?" the man said. "And because he didn't have authority." Evelyn's jaw set. Authority. The word landed like an accusation. She ended the meeting 10 minutes later with a single directive. "I want the full maintenance log on my desk by noon, and I want Mr. Hill's termination file reopened." When Marcus returned the fire marshal's call, the conversation lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes that reframed the last 3 years of his life. "They ignored you?" Reyes asked, incredulous. "They acknowledged the reports," Marcus replied evenly. "They didn't act. You understand the liability exposure," Reyes said. "I do. Would you be willing to submit a sworn statement?" Marcus glanced at Emily in the rearview mirror, backpack too big for her shoulders, eyes bright and trusting. He thought of the canvas bag, the locker, the way the security supervisor wouldn't meet his gaze. "Yes," Marcus said, "I would." By late afternoon, Evelyn had read enough to know 2 things. First, the building was not as safe as her quarterly reports claimed. Second, Marcus Hill had been right. Repeatedly, quietly, without posturing or escalation. She closed the folder and sat back. The city outside her window blurred into streaks of steel and light. For the first time in years, Evelyn Parker felt something close to fear. Not of scandal, of consequence. She authorized a temporary injunction halting further cost deferrals and drafted an internal memo reinstating Marcus Hill as a consultant pending review. Her finger hovered over the send button longer than necessary. This wasn't restitution. It was containment. Marcus received the email while heating leftover soup. The subject line stopped him cold. Reinstatement offer, temporary. Consulting basis. Emily watched his face change. "Is that good or bad?" "It's complicated," he said. He read the message twice. Consulting meant no benefits, no job security. It meant they needed his knowledge, but not his presence. He typed a reply and erased it. Typed again. He accepted. That evening, Evelyn stayed late. Too late. The office emptied. The building settled into its nighttime rhythm, the soft thrum of systems running unseen. She walked the halls alone, heels echoing, and stopped outside the facility's control room. The door was unlocked. Inside, monitors glowed. Data flowed. Evelyn stepped in uninvited, studying the screens like a foreign language she should have learned years ago. A man stood up from the console. Younger. Startled. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Marcus Hill's logs," Evelyn said. The technician hesitated, then pulled up a file. Rows of timestamps, notes, flags, each one precise, each one ignored. Evelyn felt heat rise behind her eyes. She forced it down. "Thank you," she said. "You can go." When Marcus returned to the building the next morning, his badge worked. Temporarily. He moved through familiar corridors with a different awareness. Eyes followed him now. Whispers stilled when he passed. In the lobby, Claire Donnelly stood near the elevator, speaking quietly with a woman in a tailored suit. When she saw Marcus, she nodded once. Respect, recognition, nothing more. Upstairs, Evelyn waited in the conference room, hands folded, posture exact. When Marcus entered, she stood. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm being paid to," Marcus replied. A flicker crossed her face. Not offense. Interest. She gestured for him to sit. "We need to discuss the building." "We need to discuss accountability," Marcus said, remaining standing. The air tightened. Evelyn studied him, then really studied him. Not the uniform, not the role, the man. The restraint it took to stand there and speak without anger. "You're right," she said finally. The word tasted unfamiliar. Outside the room, the building hummed. Inside, two lives that had run parallel without touching finally collided, not in jealousy or sentiment, but in the slow, dangerous recognition that systems break quietly first, and the people who try to warn you are usually the ones you push out the door. Evelyn Parker did not apologize. Not then. Not with cameras off and doors closed. Not with the city humming below. Like a living thing, she had learned to command, but never comfort. She stood at the head of the conference room table, spine-straight hands resting lightly on the glass, and studied Marcus Hill as if he were a complex equation she had underestimated. "You have leverage," she said, "whether you want it or not." Marcus didn't sit. He set his canvas bag down carefully by the chair and kept his weight balanced on both feet, ready to move if he had to. "I didn't ask for it." "No," Evelyn replied. "You earned it." The word landed hard. Earned. It was the first time anyone in that building had used it in reference to him without irony. Marcus felt the familiar instinct to deflect, to minimize, to keep himself small enough to survive. He pushed it down. "I'm here to keep people safe," he said, "not to trade favors." Evelyn nodded once. "Then we're aligned." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were blueprints, inspection reports, internal emails with sections redacted. Marcus flipped through them with a practiced eye. His jaw tightened. "These approvals were rushed," he said. "Some of these fixes can't be phased. They have to happen all at once." "I know," Evelyn said. "That's why I brought you back." "On a temporary contract," Marcus replied without looking up. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Because the board won't authorize more without proof." Marcus finally met her gaze. "And what happens if the proof costs more than your quarterly targets?" For the first time, silence stretched without Evelyn controlling it. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed. A distant door closed. "We'll see," she said. That answer told Marcus everything he needed to know. Over the next 10 days, the building became a pressure cooker. Inspections intensified. Fire code violations surfaced. A city notice arrived with bold lettering and tighter deadlines. The press sniffed around the edges, catching wind of routine safety reviews that were anything but routine. Marcus worked 16-hour days. He climbed shafts no one had entered in years, traced wiring that had been rerouted and forgotten, documented failures waiting patiently for the right moment to become disasters. He didn't complain. He didn't grandstand. He just worked. People noticed. A junior analyst stopped him in the hallway one night, eyes wide. "You're the reason the West Wing didn't flood last year, right?" Marcus shrugged. "Water follows gravity." She laughed, nervous. "My dad used to say that." On the 11th day, the power flickered. Just once. Just long enough for the lights to dim and the building to inhale sharply. Marcus froze mid-step, listening. The hum returned uneven. He didn't wait for confirmation. He ran. By the time he reached the sub-basement, the smell of overheated insulation hit him hard. He yanked open the access panel and swore under his breath. The secondary generator was compensating for a load it was never meant to carry. Someone had overridden the fail-safe months ago. Marcus grabbed his phone and dialed Evelyn's direct line. It rang twice. "We have a problem," he said when she answered. No greeting. No preamble. "I'm listening," she said. "If that generator trips, you'll lose half the building. Possibly more." "How long minutes?" Marcus said. "Maybe less." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Do what you need to do." "I need authorization," Marcus replied. "This fix will shut down the executive floors." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Do it," Evelyn said. "I'll handle the fallout." Marcus disconnected and moved fast. He shouted instructions to the night crew, voice sharp controlled. Switches flipped. Systems groaned. The lights on the upper floors went dark. Phones exploded. Evelyn stood in the darkened executive corridor, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows across faces unused to discomfort. A board member shouted. Another demanded explanations. Evelyn raised one hand, and the room stilled. "This is happening," she said, "because it needs to." When the power stabilized 20 minutes later, the building exhaled. Marcus leaned against a concrete wall, sweat cooling on his skin. His hands shook. He forced them still. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Emily. Dad, are you okay?" He smiled despite himself. Typed back. "Always." The next morning, headlines hit. Not catastrophic, but pointed. Questions about deferred maintenance, about oversight, about who signed what and when. Names began to surface. Evelyn sat in a board meeting that felt less like governance and more like judgment. Faces hardened, voices sharpened. "We need a scapegoat," one man said plainly. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the empty chair where Marcus would never sit. "We need accountability," she corrected. "Same thing," another voice snapped. Evelyn thought of the sub-basement, the overridden failsafe, the man who had warned them and been escorted out of the lobby like a criminal. "No," she said. "It isn't." The vote was split. Tension crackled. Finally, the chair of the board leaned forward. "You're taking this personally." Evelyn met his gaze. "I'm taking this responsibly." That night, Marcus was home early for the first time in weeks. Emily spread her homework across the table, explaining fractions with the confidence of someone who believed answers existed if you looked long enough. "You ever think about changing jobs?" she asked suddenly. Marcus stilled. "Why?" She shrugged. "You look tired, but different." He considered her words. The way children named truths adults danced around. Sometimes he said, "But not yet." A knock sounded at the door. Marcus opened it to find a courier holding a thick envelope. No logo, just his name handwritten. Inside was a notice. Formal, legal, a city mandate ordering immediate compliance with safety upgrades signed and sealed. At the bottom, a handwritten note in the margin. Approved. All departments. Effective immediately. No signature. Marcus sat down slowly. Emily peered over his shoulder. Is that bad? No, he said. It's overdue. Across the city, Evelyn stared at the same document on her screen, the weight of it settling into her bones. She had crossed a line. Maybe several. The fallout would come. She knew that. But for the first time in decades, the decision felt clean. She thought of Marcus Hill standing in her conference room refusing to sit, of the way the building had nearly failed because no one wanted to hear inconvenient truths. Systems, she realized, didn't break when they were stressed. They broke when they were ignored. And the man she had once let disappear through the front doors was now holding the one thing she could no longer afford to underestimate. The board moved first. They didn't announce it. They never did. Power preferred quiet corridors and closed calendars. By the time Marcus Hill's phone began vibrating on a Tuesday morning that felt too calm to be honest, the decision had already been framed, rehearsed, and blessed by men who had never set foot below the parking level. The caller ID read, "Unknown." Marcus let it ring once, then answered. "This is Hill, Mr. Hill," a man said, voice smooth in the way that meant legal training. "My name is Thomas Reed. I represent the board of directors for Carver Financial Group. We'd like to invite you to a private discussion." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Emily lace her sneakers with fierce concentration. "About what a concern," Reed replied. "Regarding your recent involvement with internal systems." Marcus closed his eyes. He already knew. Send it in writing. There was a pause. Respect recalibrated. We will. Across town, Evelyn Parker sat alone in her office jacket draped over the back of her chair, staring at a framed photo she kept turned face down most days. It showed her at 30, standing beside the first building she'd helped acquire, smile, sharp eyes, fearless. Back then, she'd believed excellence insulated you from consequence. Her phone buzzed. Board notification. Mandatory executive session. That afternoon, no agenda. She stood slowly. This wasn't about safety. It was about control. By noon, the letter arrived at Marcus's apartment. Heavy paper. Formal language. Carefully chosen words that sounded reasonable until you read them twice. The board was concerned about his scope of influence. His temporary consulting role would be suspended pending review. Effective immediately. Emily watched him read it. "Is that from your work?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Are you in trouble?" He folded the letter with deliberate care. "They want me quiet." She frowned. "Did you do something bad?" Marcus met her eyes. No. That answer mattered more than anything else. At 2:15, the executive conference room filled with restrained hostility. Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table. Faces around her were composed, polite, predatory. The chair cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the Hill situation." Evelyn didn't wait. "You already did." A murmur rippled. "This man," the chair continued, "has exceeded his remit. He's created exposure." "He prevented a failure," Evelyn replied. "By acting without authorization," another board member snapped. Evelyn leaned forward. "He acted because we didn't." The room chilled. Thomas Reed folded his hands. "This isn't about right or wrong. It's about governance." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "It's about fear." Eyes narrowed. "You're afraid of what happens when someone without a title knows more than the people who sign the checks," she continued. "You're afraid because he documented it." The chair exhaled slowly. "You're taking this personally." Evelyn felt the truth of that settle in her chest. "I'm taking responsibility." The vote followed. Suspension upheld. Consultant access revoked. The decision passed by a margin slim enough to sting. Evelyn rose before they could speak again. Then you'd better hope nothing else breaks. Marcus spent the afternoon walking. He didn't go home. He didn't go to the building. He walked the city, hands in his pockets, breathing cold air until his thoughts lined up straight. He thought about systems, about how they failed, not all at once, one ignored warning at a time. At 4:40 his phone rang again. Deputy Fire Marshal Reyes. They shut you down? Reyes asked. Yes. Reyes cursed softly. We've got another inspection scheduled. I could use your testimony. Marcus stopped walking. They don't want me near the building. They don't control the city, Reyes said. Marcus smiled once. It didn't reach his eyes. Send me the paperwork. That evening, Evelyn sat in the dark of her office, lights off, city glowing. She replayed the board's words the way governance had become a shield for cowardice. Her phone buzzed with a message she hadn't expected. From City Compliance Office. Subject External Review. Notification? She read it twice. Then a third time. An external audit. Full scope. Triggered by a whistleblower affidavit. Not anonymous. Named. Marcus Hill. Evelyn closed her eyes. He had chosen escalation. Not revenge. Protection. At 7:10, Marcus tucked Emily into bed. She held his hand longer than usual. Are you going to lose your job? He brushed her hair back. I don't know. She nodded, absorbing uncertainty with a child's brutal honesty. If you do, we'll be okay. You always fix things. The words cut deeper than any accusation. The next morning, the building reopened under scrutiny. Inspectors arrived, clipboards out, doors unlocked that had stayed closed for years. Whispers spread faster than emails. The press showed up by lunch. Evelyn stood at the entrance as cameras flashed, face composed, answers measured. She did not deflect. She did not deny. When asked about Marcus Hill, she said only, he did his job. Inside, the board fractured. Calls flew. Legal strategies collided. Someone suggested distancing Evelyn from the narrative. She heard it and didn't respond. By evening, the city issued a preliminary finding. Deferred maintenance, documented warnings, executive overrides. The language was dry. The implications were not. Marcus received the update while eating takeout on the couch, Emily beside him, homework spread between them. He read silently, then set the phone down. What happened? She asked. They're looking, he said. Good, she replied with the certainty of someone who believed truth should be simple. At 9:30, Evelyn's phone rang. Unknown number. Evelyn Parker, she answered. This is Alan Reyes, the voice said. We need to talk. I know, she replied. There was a pause. Then, you should also know, Reyes added, that Mr. Hill refused to settle. Evelyn closed her eyes. I didn't expect him to. He said something that stuck with me. Reyes continued. He said systems don't change when people feel bad. They change when they're forced to. Evelyn felt a strange, unwelcome relief. Later that night, she drove home instead of taking the car service. The streets were wet, reflecting city lights in broken patterns. She thought about the young woman in the lobby who wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. About the way the board had spoken his name like a liability. At a red light, she realized something that settled heavily but cleanly in her chest. She could lose her position. And for the first time, that didn't feel like the worst thing. In a small apartment miles away, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the letter from the board beside him, the city notice folded neatly on top. Emily slept. The radiator clicked. The world felt uncertain but aligned. He hadn't sought power. He hadn't wanted attention. But when the system tried to silence him, he had chosen to speak anyway. And somewhere in the machinery of the city, something had finally begun to turn. The headlines didn't use Marcus Hill's name at first. They never did when the story was still dangerous. They talked about infrastructure oversight, deferred maintenance, executive accountability. They used words that sounded abstract enough to keep the human cost at arm's length. Evelyn Parker read every article in silence alone in her office, the city framed behind her like a witness that refused to blink. By the third day, the board stopped calling her. By the fourth, the calls started coming from places that didn't ask permission. Regulators, city officials, insurance carriers, people who didn't care about internal politics or carefully worded defenses, people who cared about liability paper trails and signatures at the bottom of forms. Marcus spent those same days moving in the opposite direction. Quieter. Smaller. He picked Emily up from school on time. He cooked dinners that stretched leftovers into something warm and steady. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge, replaced a flickering bulb. Ordinary acts. Grounding acts. He didn't watch the news. He didn't need to. At 9:40 on Friday morning, a black sedan pulled up outside his building. Marcus saw it from the kitchen window and felt his chest tighten not with fear, but with recognition. This was how power moved when it could no longer hide behind emails. He opened the door before the knock came. The man on the stoop wore a tailored coat and a practiced expression. Mr. Hill. Yes, I'm Thomas Reed. We spoke briefly on the phone. Marcus stepped aside. You have 5 minutes. They sat at the small kitchen table. Reed placed a folder between them, careful, almost respectful. The board is prepared to offer a settlement, Reed said. Compensation, confidentiality, a clean separation. Marcus didn't open the folder, and the building Reed's lips pressed together. The company will address the city's concerns. That's not an answer, Marcus said. Reed inhaled slowly. You have leverage, more than you realize. This is an opportunity to secure your daughter's future. Emily's name hung in the air like a test. Marcus folded his hands. My daughter's future doesn't belong to you. Reed leaned forward. You could walk away from this. Comfortably. Marcus met his gaze. I already did. They pulled me back. Silence stretched. Reed gathered his folder. The offer stands, for now. When he left, Marcus locked the door and sat alone at the table until the kettle whistled. He poured the water out without making tea. Across the city, Evelyn Parker walked into a conference room filled with people who no longer pretended she was untouchable. The chair of the board sat stiffly, eyes tired. The city has issued a preliminary compliance mandate, he said. We need a unified response. Evelyn scanned the room. Faces she'd known for years avoided her eyes. You need a strategy, someone added, and a concession. Evelyn nodded once. Then we should stop pretending this is about me. A few heads lifted. This company ignored warnings, she continued, repeatedly. Not because we didn't know better, because we chose not to listen. That kind of statement invites liability, Thomas Reed interjected. So does silence, Evelyn replied. She pushed a document across the table. Resignation letter, effective in 30 days. The room erupted. You can't do that. The chair snapped. I can, Evelyn said. And I am. She stood. You want a concession? Start with accountability. She left before they could stop her. The news broke that afternoon. CEO to step down amid investigation, market reaction swift. Stock dipped. Analysts speculated. No one mentioned Marcus Hill. Not yet. That evening, Emily found Marcus sitting on the floor of her room, sorting old photos. Why are you smiling like that? She asked. Just thinking, he said. About what? About how sometimes doing the right thing costs more than you think, he replied. And sometimes it costs less. She considered that, then nodded as if filing it away for later. The city hearings began the following week. Long days, fluorescent lights, testimony that circled the same truths from different mouths. Marcus spoke once, clearly, without drama. He explained systems, timelines, decisions. When asked why he hadn't gone public sooner, he answered simply, "I believed my job was to fix problems, not create noise." The room stilled. Outside, cameras waited. Questions flew. Marcus declined them all. Evelyn watched the testimony from a small monitor in her kitchen, hair-loose sleeves rolled up. She saw the way Marcus spoke without anger, the way he never once said her name. It was the most devastating choice he could have made. After the hearings adjourned for the day, Evelyn drove to the south side without calling ahead. She parked down the block and walked the rest of the way, coat pulled tight, hands bare in the cold. She stood on the stoop longer than necessary before knocking. Marcus opened the door and froze. "I won't stay long," Evelyn said. He stepped aside. They stood in the narrow living room, the radiator ticking, Emily's laughter floating faintly from the bedroom where she was talking to a friend on the phone. "I resigned," Evelyn said. "I know," Marcus replied. "I didn't do it for you," she added quickly. "I didn't think you did." She nodded. "Good." They stood in silence. Two people who had seen each other too late and then too clearly. "I won't accept the settlement," Marcus said finally. "Not as it's written." Evelyn looked at him. "What do you want?" He thought of the generator, the overridden failsafe, the young analyst in the hallway, his daughter's voice in the morning. "I want systems that don't depend on who gets noticed," he said. "I want protections that don't vanish when someone speaks up, and I want it written into policy." Evelyn exhaled. "That will make enemies." Marcus met her gaze. "It already has." She nodded once. Respect finally earned. As she turned to leave, Emily stepped into the hallway, curiosity written all over her face. Evelyn stopped. "This is..." Emily, Marcus said. Evelyn bent slightly, lowering herself to eye level. "It's nice to meet you." Emily studied her with the unfiltered scrutiny of a child. "Are you the lady from the news?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Yes." Emily nodded. "My dad fixes things." Evelyn straightened throat tight. "I know." When the door closed behind her, Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, city noise rushing back in. She felt lighter, exposed, alive in a way she hadn't in years. Inside, Marcus sat back down at the kitchen table, the weight of the week settling into something solid. He hadn't won. Not yet. But the system had cracked wide enough for light to get in. And for the first time since the morning they walked him out of the lobby, Marcus Hill felt certain that silence was no longer the safest choice. The settlement never came. Not because the board withdrew it, but because Marcus Hill never answered the follow-up calls. The emails stacked up instead, their tone shifting week by week from cordial to urgent to quietly threatening. He read everyone. He saved everyone. Then he closed his laptop and walked Emily to school like nothing had changed. But something had. At 7:30 each morning, a city vehicle parked across the street from the building where he once worked. Inspectors rotated in shifts now. Clipboards, hard hats, no familiarity. The tower that had once hummed with unexamined confidence moved differently, slower, like an animal aware of a wound it could no longer ignore. Marcus noticed it when he passed by on his way to temporary consulting jobs. The rhythm was off. Elevators paused too long. Security scanned badges twice. Systems under scrutiny never relaxed. Inside the building, people spoke his name carefully. Evelyn Parker learned this secondhand. She had surrendered her office keys, cleared out her desk, and driven home without an escort for the first time in years. Her apartment felt strange to her. Too quiet, too personal. She slept badly and woke early habits that refused to leave even when authority did. She spent her mornings reading city statutes, whistleblower protections, labor law. Documents she had once delegated now demanded her attention. She saw with a clarity that made her wince how often policy was written to appear fair while quietly discouraging challenge. One afternoon her phone rang, a number she recognized but hadn't expected. "Evelyn Parker," she answered. "This is Marlene Shaw," the voice said. "Department of Labor. I was told you might be willing to speak candidly." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I don't have much left to protect." Goodshaw replied. "Then, let's talk about systems." Marcus was testifying again 2 days later. Not publicly this time. Closed session, recorded. The room was smaller, the questions sharper. They asked him why he hadn't taken the settlement. He answered honestly, because silence costs more in the long run. They asked if he was afraid. "Yes," Marcus said, "every day." That answer shifted something in the room. Outside, Emily waited with a book on her lap, legs swinging. When Marcus emerged, she looked up immediately. "How'd it go?" "I told the truth," he said. She nodded, satisfied. "That's your thing." That evening, a letter arrived from the city. Formal. Direct. Marcus opened it at the kitchen table while Emily colored beside him. They were offering him a position. Not with the company. With the city. Facilities Oversight Liaison. Temporary renewable. Authority to audit, report, and intervene when safety concerns were overridden for non-technical reasons. Marcus read it twice. The pay was modest. The hours unpredictable. The responsibility heavy. Emily leaned over. "Is that a job?" "Yes," Marcus said slowly. "Do you want it?" He thought of the boardroom, the sub-basement, the generator humming under strain. "I think I need it," he replied. When Evelyn heard the news, she sat very still. The city had done what she could not from inside the system. It had given Marcus legitimacy that didn't depend on corporate permission. She drove to the lake that afternoon and walked until the wind burned her cheeks. She thought about the word power, how she had once defined it as control, how it had slipped through her fingers the moment she tried to hold it too tightly. 2 weeks later, the city released its findings. They didn't name villains. They never did. They named failures, patterns, incentives misaligned with safety, a culture that rewarded silence and punished friction. The company's stock dropped again. The board issued statements, apologies without names attached. Marcus didn't read them. He spent his first day in the new role walking through a hospital complex on the west side, listening more than he spoke. He asked technicians where the problems were, then waited long enough for real answers. He wrote things down. He followed up. People noticed that too. At home, Emily taped a handwritten sign to the refrigerator. It read, "My dad fixes big things." Marcus pretended not to see it. He saw it every time. Evelyn received an invitation a month later. A panel discussion. Infrastructure accountability. Public sector and private sector in conversation. Her name was listed last. Marcus Hill's was listed first. She almost declined. Instead, she went. They sat on opposite ends of the stage. Cameras rolled. Questions came. When asked what she would have done differently, Evelyn didn't hedge. "I would have listened sooner," she said, "and I would have understood that authority is not the same as insight." When Marcus spoke, he didn't contradict her. He expanded. "Systems don't fail because people are evil," he said. "They fail because the people closest to the consequences aren't allowed to speak." The audience leaned in. Afterward, backstage, Evelyn approached him carefully, like someone entering unfamiliar terrain. "You didn't have to share the stage with me," she said. "I didn't do it for you," Marcus replied. Then he paused. "But I didn't avoid it either." She nodded. "That felt fair?" They stood there a moment longer, the noise of the event muffled behind the curtain. "I'm still learning," Evelyn said quietly. Marcus met her gaze. "So am I." That night, Marcus and Emily watered the small plant on the windowsill. It had survived the winter stubborn and green. "Should we move it to a bigger pot?" Emily asked. "Soon," Marcus said, "when it's ready." Outside, the city moved on. Buildings rose, systems adjusted, not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. And for the first time in a long while, Marcus Hill didn't feel like he was standing alone at the edge of something vast and indifferent. He felt instead like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, holding the line between silence and change, teaching his daughter by example that some things were worth speaking for, even when your voice shook. The work wasn't finished, but it had finally begun. The call came on a Sunday night just as Marcus Hill was turning off the kitchen light. Unknown number. Again. He let it ring twice long enough to feel Emily pause behind him, long enough to decide whether answering would pull something new into their lives, or finally close a door. He picked up on the fourth ring. "This is Hill." "Mr. Hill," a woman said, voice low-controlled, used to rooms where people listened. "My name is Dana Whitaker. I'm interim chief counsel for Carver Financial Group." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "You're calling late." "Yes," Dana said, "because this isn't a request I can put in writing." Emily hovered near the hallway, pretending to adjust her backpack, even though school was over for the week. Marcus turned slightly so she couldn't read his face. "I'm listening," he said. "We have a problem," Dana continued. "The city's findings triggered something we didn't anticipate." Marcus waited. Silence was leverage now. A federal inquiry, she added. Labor retaliation. Whistleblower obstruction. If it goes where it looks like it's going, people are going to prison. Marcus closed his eyes. "And you think I can stop it?" he said. "No," Dana replied quickly. "I think you can explain it." "Explain what?" The difference, she said, choosing her words carefully between a broken system and criminal intent. Marcus leaned against the counter. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space between breaths. "You didn't care about that difference when you fired me," he said. "No," Dana agreed. "We cared about survival." Emily's small voice cut in sharper than either of them expected. Dad Marcus covered the phone. "Give me 1 minute," he whispered. She nodded, eyes searching his face. She had learned what serious looked like. When he returned to the call, his voice was steady. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who documented everything Dana said, and because you refused to take the money." Marcus smiled once. It was a tired smile. "That makes me dangerous." "Yes," Dana said, "it also makes you credible." He looked toward Emily's room. The door was half closed. A sliver of light spilled onto the floor. "I don't protect institutions," Marcus said. "I protect people. That's exactly why I'm calling," Dana replied. The meeting took place 3 days later in a federal building that smelled like old paper and polished floors. Marcus arrived, early city badge clipped to his jacket notebook under his arm. He sat alone at the table while attorneys filled the room, their conversations low, precise, predatory. Dana Whitaker entered last. Mid-40s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending her hand. Marcus shook it. "I didn't come for you." She nodded. "I know." Across the table sat representatives from the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, and a man who didn't introduce himself but asked questions that landed like traps. "Mr. Hill," he said, "why did you refuse the settlement?" Marcus didn't hesitate, because it required silence. And silence would have protected whom? Everyone with more power than me. Marcus replied. A pen paused mid-scratch. They asked him to walk through the timeline. He did. Calm, precise, no speculation, just facts, emails, dates, signatures. The room shifted as the pattern became undeniable. When they asked what he wanted, now Marcus leaned back. "I want safeguards," he said. "Independent oversight, written protections for anyone who flags safety issues. And I want them enforced even when it's inconvenient." Dana watched him closely. "You understand this could dismantle the current leadership structure?" "Yes," Marcus said. "You understand it could cost people their careers?" "Yes." "And you're still here," the unnamed man said. Marcus thought of Emily asleep with her book half open. "I am." Outside the building, Evelyn Parker sat in her car engine off hands on the steering wheel. She hadn't been invited inside. Not yet. But she knew the meeting was happening. She could feel it the way you felt a storm before the rain. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dana. "He's holding the line." Evelyn closed her eyes. She had thought resigning was the end of her reckoning. She had been wrong. It was only the beginning. Inside the conference room, the questions ended. The officials gathered their files. The unnamed man stood. "You should know," he said to Marcus, "this won't be clean." Marcus nodded. Change never is. When Marcus returned home that evening, Emily was waiting at the table, homework spread out even though she didn't need to do it. "You were gone a long time," she said. "I had a meeting," Marcus replied. "Did you fix anything?" He smiled softly. "Not yet." She considered that. "Sometimes it takes a while." "Yes," Marcus said. "It does." 2 weeks later, the indictments dropped. They didn't name Marcus Hill in the headlines, but his fingerprints were everywhere. Obstruction of oversight, retaliation against protected disclosures. The language was stark, the consequences immediate. The board dissolved. Executives resigned. Attorneys issued statements that sounded like surrender wrapped in regret. Carver Financial Group's stock plunged. Evelyn watched the coverage from her living room volume low tea, growing cold in her hands. She didn't flinch when her own name appeared, not as a defendant, but as a cooperating witness. She had crossed a line and burned the bridge behind her. Strangely, she felt lighter. Marcus was asked to speak again, this time at a public hearing. Cameras, reporters, the full weight of attention he had never sought. He almost declined. Emily changed his mind. "You always tell me to stand up straight when something matters," she said. "This sounds like something that matters." At the hearing, Marcus spoke last. The room was packed, faces tense. When he stepped to the microphone, the noise faded. "I'm not here because I'm brave," he said. "I'm here because I was tired of being quiet." A murmur rippled. "I did my job," Marcus continued. "I warned people. I documented risks. I trusted the system to respond. When it didn't, I learned something important." He paused. "Systems don't protect people by accident. They do it because someone made them." The hearing adjourned in silence. That night, as Marcus tucked Emily into bed, she asked, "Are you famous now?" He laughed softly. "No." "Good," she said. "I like you regular." Marcus turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the quiet of a life that had grown louder in all the right ways. Across the city, Evelyn Parker sat at her desk, drafting a statement she might never release. She wrote and deleted and wrote again, searching for words that didn't sound like excuses. She stopped when she realized something uncomfortable and undeniable. Marcus Hill hadn't forced her to change. He had simply refused to disappear, and in doing so, he had exposed a truth that neither of them could unsee. Power did not live in the offices at the top of the building anymore. It had moved, quietly, into the hands of the man everyone once walked past without looking. The city adjusted the way it always did, quietly and without apology. Construction barriers went up around the Carver Tower, orange and unavoidable. Inspectors came and went. New faces replaced old ones in conference rooms that still smelled faintly of ambition and fear. Marcus Hill noticed the change, not from inside the building, but from the sidewalk across the street as he walked Emily to school, her hand warm in his glove. "Is that where you used to work?" she asked, watching men in hard hats point at blueprints. "Yes," Marcus said. "Is it better now?" He considered the question. "It's trying." Emily accepted that. She usually did. Marcus's days filled quickly. The city role that had begun as temporary grew heavier by the week. Hospitals. Schools. Public housing towers built before anyone thought about what time did to steel and wire. Everywhere he went, he heard the same story told in different voices. Someone warned. Someone wrote it down. Someone higher up decided it could wait. Marcus listened. He wrote things down. And this time people noticed. At a public transit depot on the north side, a veteran electrician pulled him aside after an inspection. "You're the first one who didn't treat us like we were complaining," the man said. "You treated us like we knew something." Marcus nodded. "You do." Word spread slowly. Not viral, not loud, just enough. Evelyn Parker followed it from a distance. She had declined interviews. She had refused the book deal that appeared 2 days after the indictments. She took a short-term advisory role with a nonprofit focused on compliance reform, the kind of work that didn't come with applause or control. Her days felt longer now, less insulated, more real. One afternoon, she sat across from a group of mid-level managers in a converted warehouse, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. They weren't impressed by her resume. They were suspicious. She let them be. When someone asked why she was there, she answered honestly, "Because I spent decades thinking efficiency mattered more than people." I was wrong. The room stayed quiet. Not forgiving, but listening. Marcus and Evelyn didn't speak often. When they did, it was brief, practical. A text about a policy draft. A question about enforcement language. No personal overtures. No shortcuts. Trust, Marcus had learned, was something you built with consistency, not declarations. One evening, as spring pushed back against winter, Marcus came home to find Emily at the table with a woman he didn't recognize. The woman stood immediately, hands visible, posture careful. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm Angela Ruiz. I work with the city council." Marcus relaxed slightly. "What's going on?" Angela smiled at Emily. "Your dad's been making things difficult." Emily beamed. "He does that." Angela laughed softly. "We're drafting a new ordinance. Whistleblower protections tied directly to safety reporting. We wanted his input." Marcus sat. "You want advice or cover?" "Both," Angela admitted. Marcus nodded. "Then I want it written in plain language. No loopholes." Angela grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." The ordinance passed 2 months later by a narrow margin. It wasn't perfect. It was enough. The night it became law. Marcus and Emily celebrated with takeout and paper plates. Emily insisted on dessert first. Marcus let her. Some rules were meant to bend. "Does this mean you're done?" Emily asked, spoon halfway to her mouth. Marcus shook his head. "It means we keep going." She nodded, serious. "Good." Across town, Evelyn read the ordinance twice, then a third time. She recognized phrases Marcus favored. Direct. Uncomfortable. Honest. She closed the document and leaned back, the weight of it settling into something like pride she hadn't earned but respected. The invitation came in early summer. A community forum, old theater, folding chairs, no stage lights, just voices. Marcus didn't want to go. Emily changed his mind again. "You always say fixing things takes showing up," she said. So they went. The theater filled with people who had never been invited into decision-making rooms. Maintenance workers, nurses, custodians, bus drivers, people whose jobs existed in the background of everyone else's lives. They spoke hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Marcus listened from the aisle, notebook closed. When his turn came, he stood without notes. "I didn't plan to be here," he said. "I planned to do my job." Laughter rippled gentle. "I learned something the hard way," Marcus continued. "Silence feels safe until it's not. And when systems break, they break on the people who had no say in how they were built." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What if speaking up costs you everything?" Marcus met her eyes. "Then it costs you less than staying quiet." The room held that. Afterward, Evelyn waited near the exit. She didn't approach until Marcus saw her. "Good turnout," she said. "Yes," Marcus replied. They stood there, the old tension replaced by something steadier. Respect hard-won and unfinished. "I read the ordinance," Evelyn said. "It's strong." "It's a start," Marcus replied. She nodded. "I've been asked to help replicate it elsewhere." "Will you?" Marcus asked. Evelyn thought of the boardroom, the resignation letter, the silence she had once mistaken for order. "Yes," she said, "if I'm useful." Marcus considered her for a moment, then nodded once. Permission, not forgiveness. As they stepped outside, Emily ran up ice cream already melting down her wrist. "Dad, they clapped for you." He smiled. "They clapped for everyone." Emily looked at Evelyn. "Are you the boss?" Evelyn laughed, surprised by it. "Not anymore." Emily nodded, satisfied. "That's okay. My dad doesn't like bosses." Marcus winced. Evelyn smiled wider. Late that night, Marcus sat by the window city lights, blinking like a language he was still learning. He thought about the building that had fired him, the system that had tried to swallow him whole, the quiet power that came from refusing to disappear. He thought about Emily asleep down the hall, her future no longer balanced on a single paycheck or a single person's approval. The city wouldn't fix itself overnight. Systems never did. But they could bend. And sometimes, if enough people refused to look away, they could change direction entirely. Marcus closed the notebook he hadn't needed that night and turned off the light. The hum of the city steady outside, no longer indifferent, not quite yet. Just, but finally listening. The letter arrived without warning, tucked between utility bills and a school fundraiser flyer, its return address stamped with a seal Marcus recognized but had hoped he wouldn't see again. Federal District Court. He didn't open it right away. He set it on the counter, washed his hands, dried them carefully the way he did before touching anything that mattered. Emily sat at the table building a lopsided tower from spare change, narrating her progress as if coins needed encouragement. "Dad," she said, not looking up, "if I get to 50 cents, I win." Marcus smiled faintly. "Win what?" She shrugged. "Time." He opened the letter. Subpoena. Appearance required. Material witness. The date was circled in bold ink by someone who didn't know his life but expected him to rearrange it anyway. Marcus exhaled, slowly. The kitchen felt smaller. Emily looked up then. She always knew. "Bad mail." "Important mail," Marcus said. She nodded solemn. "Important is harder." "Yes," he said. "It is." Across the city, Evelyn Parker received a similar envelope, heavier, more formal, delivered by courier. She opened hers, standing in the hallway, coat still on keys in hand. Cooperating witness. Deposition scheduled. Her name spelled correctly, finally, without the title she had worn like armor. She leaned against the wall until the words stopped swimming. The trial was coming. Not the quiet kind that resolved itself in conference rooms. The public kind. The kind that asked questions out loud. In the weeks that followed, Marcus prepared the way he always had, methodically. He reviewed emails, logs, timestamps. He walked Emily to school, picked her up, made dinner, fixed the leaky faucet that refused to respect its own repair. Nothing was dramatic. That was the hardest part. On the morning of his appearance, the courtroom buzzed with low conversation, a hive of anticipation. Marcus sat on the wooden bench, notebook closed on his lap, city badge tucked into his jacket pocket. When his name was called, he stood without hesitation. He told the truth. He spoke about systems, about warnings logged and ignored, about meetings where silence was mistaken for agreement. He didn't embellish. He didn't accuse. He didn't name Evelyn unless asked directly. When the prosecutor pressed him voice sharp, trying to carve out intent from procedure, Marcus met it calmly. "Did you believe executives knew the risks?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "Did they act?" "No." "Why not?" Marcus paused. The courtroom leaned in. "Because acting would have cost them comfort," he said, "and ignoring it cost them nothing. Until it did." The defense tried a different angle. "You benefited from this exposure, didn't you?" "New role. Public recognition." Marcus didn't smile. "I lost my job. I lost my health insurance. I lost sleep. I gained responsibility." A murmur rippled through the room. When Evelyn took the stand later that day, she felt the weight of every eye. She answered questions with precision, refusing to soften the truth or dramatize it. When asked why she had approved cost deferrals, she didn't hide. "I believed the risk was manageable," she said. "I was wrong." "Why didn't you listen to Mr. Hill?" the prosecutor asked. Evelyn inhaled. "Because I was trained not to," she said. "Because the system rewarded speed over listening, and I benefited from that system." The defense shifted uncomfortably. After court adjourned, reporters surged. Marcus slipped out a side-door phone pressed to his ear, Emily's voice grounding him. "Did you do good?" she asked. "I did my best," he replied. "That counts," she said with the authority of someone who believed it. The verdict came weeks later. Guilty on multiple counts. Sentencing pending. The headlines finally used Marcus's name carefully, respectfully, like they were testing whether it belonged there. He didn't read them. The real reckoning came quieter. One afternoon, a man approached him outside a public school Marcus was inspecting. Mid-40s, nervous smile. Wore a company badge from a different firm. "I used to work at Carver," the man said. "Facilities. I quit after what happened." Marcus nodded. "Okay. I wanted to say, seeing you stand up there made it easier to leave," the man continued. "I thought I was weak." Marcus shook his head. "You chose yourself. That's not weakness." The man exhaled, something loosening in his shoulders, and walked away lighter than he had arrived. That night, Marcus found Emily asleep at the table, crayons scattered like fallen leaves. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and sat on the edge of the mattress longer than usual. "You okay, Dad?" she murmured, half awake. "Yes," he said. "Are you?" She nodded. "I'm proud of you." The words landed deeper than applause ever could. Across town, Evelyn sat at her desk, the same one she'd kept, after resigning, now cluttered with drafts and notes that didn't belong to any corporation. She was writing a letter, not to the court, not to the press, to herself. She wrote about the first time she'd walked past Marcus Hill without seeing him. About how invisibility wasn't accidental, it was engineered. About how power felt safer when it didn't have to listen. She didn't know if she would ever send the letter. Writing it was enough. On the day sentencing was announced, Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, sunlight sharp against stone. Cameras flashed. He shielded his eyes not from the glare, but from the noise. A reporter shouted, "Do you feel vindicated?" Marcus paused. He chose his words carefully. "I feel responsible," he said. "Vindication ends things. Responsibility keeps them going." The reporter blinked, unsure how to frame that. At home, Emily taped a new sign to the refrigerator right next to the old one. This one read, "We don't stay quiet." Marcus laughed when he saw it. He laughed until the tension finally cracked and tears came with it, unexpected and cleansing. The trial closed a chapter. It didn't end the story. Systems were still fragile. People were still afraid. But the line had shifted. The cost of silence had been named, and once named, it could not be unseen. Marcus Hill stood in the kitchen letter from the court folded and set aside, Emily humming nearby, the city alive beyond the window. He had never wanted a spotlight. He still didn't. But he had learned something essential in the harsh light of public judgment. Being seen was not the reward. Being heard was. The city did not celebrate the end of the trial. There were no parades, no banners, no speeches about justice finally served. The courthouse steps emptied the same way they always did, people dispersing back into their lives, carrying verdicts like weather reports. Marcus Hill walked away from the building with Emily's hand in his, her steps skipping every other crack in the sidewalk, her attention already drifting toward what came next. That was how change actually happened, not with noise, but with movement. In the months that followed, Marcus settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than imposed. His role with the city expanded not upward, but outward. More buildings, more teams, more conversations that began with hesitation and ended with relief. People spoke more freely once they realized he wasn't there to punish them. He wasn't there to impress anyone either. He listened. He asked questions that made silence uncomfortable. He followed up. At a public housing complex on the west side, a boiler technician pulled him aside after an inspection. The man's hands shook slightly as he spoke not from age, but from years of being ignored. "I've been filing reports like this for 10 years, he said, holding up a stack of photocopies. No one ever came. Marcus took the papers. "I'm here now," he said. The technician exhaled a long breath that sounded like something leaving his body for good. At home, Emily adjusted to the attention around her father in the way children always did, absorbing it without letting it define her. She still complained about homework, still argued about bedtime, still asked questions that cut through adult defenses like clean glass. One night, while Marcus reviewed notes at the kitchen table, Emily watched him quietly for a long time before speaking. "You don't look scared anymore," she said. Marcus paused. "I still get scared." She tilted her head. "Not like before." He smiled. She was right. The fear had changed shape. It no longer felt like something pressing down on him. It felt like something behind him pushing him forward. Evelyn Parker watched all of this from a distance she had chosen deliberately. She never asked to meet Marcus privately again. She never inserted herself into his work. Instead, she focused on the slow, unglamorous labor of reform. Advisory panels, policy drafts, long meetings where no one cared about her past titles and everyone cared about her willingness to listen. When she spoke now, people paid attention for a different reason. Not because she commanded the room, but because she had learned how to sit in it. At a regional conference on infrastructure accountability, Evelyn spoke plainly. She talked about incentives, about how silence was rewarded long before it was punished. She talked about how leadership failed when it mistook control for competence. She did not mention Marcus Hill by name. She didn't need to. The city council passed additional measures that year. Incremental changes, oversight boards, mandatory response timelines. None of it perfect, all of it harder to ignore. Other cities called, asked questions, borrowed language, adapted it to their own systems. Marcus declined invitations to run for office, declined speaking tours, declined the label people tried to give him. He didn't see himself as a symbol. He saw himself as a worker who refused to disappear. On a warm evening in early fall, Marcus and Emily walked past the Carver Tower together. The construction barriers were gone now. The glass gleamed the same way it always had, but the building felt different, slower, more careful. "Does it still belong to them?" Emily asked. "It belongs to everyone who uses it," Marcus replied. She thought about that. "Then you still work there?" Marcus smiled. In a way. They crossed the street and kept walking. At home, the small plant on the windowsill had outgrown its pot. Emily insisted they transplant it together. Marcus held the soil steady, while she packed it in with both hands, dirt smudged across her cheek. Focus absolute. "We should give it more space," she said. "Yes," Marcus replied. "So it doesn't break." They set the plant back on the sill leaves, catching the light roots finally able to stretch without resistance. Later that night, Marcus stood by the window, the city spread out before him. Lights flickered on and off in apartments and offices, each one a small life intersecting with systems most people never thought about until they failed. He thought about the morning he had been walked out of the lobby, about the weight of that silence, about how easy it would have been to stay quiet to take the money to protect only his own small world. He thought about the cost of not doing that. Emily appeared beside him, sleepy, leaning into his side. "You did a big thing," she murmured. Marcus wrapped an arm around her. "We did." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to bed. Somewhere across the city, Evelyn Parker sat at her desk reviewing a draft policy for a hospital network in another state. She paused, reread a sentence, and rewrote it to be clearer, firmer, harder to twist. She smiled to herself, a quiet acknowledgement of how much she had unlearned. The story did not end with triumph. It ended with continuity. With people speaking when it would be easier not to. With systems bending under scrutiny instead of snapping under neglect. With a man and his daughter building a life that no longer depended on invisibility for survival. Marcus turned off the light and followed Emily down the hallway, the hum of the city steady and alive behind the walls. Tomorrow, there would be more inspections, more conversations, more resistance. That was fine. He knew what he was doing now. He knew who he was doing it for. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that quiet courage still matters, take a moment to subscribe and comment. 3 words: keep speaking up.